Welcome back to Old School Sports and our OOTP 23 playthrough of the Kansas City Royals. We are at the beginning of the free agency period for the 2030 to 2031 offseason, and you can see we've got about $40 million to spend. Now that's that's only about half of the money we initially had because we have signed a long-term star Bobby Witt Jr. to a 5-year contract, although it very well may be only 4 years, and you can see we spent about $36 million there. And then we also signed our excellent right-handed reliever, R.J. Dabovich, to a $6 million contract over the next 4 years. So those two moves filled a couple of the big holes on our teams, third base and a quality member of our bullpen. But we still have two real big holes compared to last year, at least. At shortstop, where we've lost Tim Anderson to free agency, and at the top of our rotation, where we're likely to lose Spencer Bauer. And you can see that our longtime ace, Spencer Bauer, is the best starting pitcher available, but he's also looking for over $35 million a year. Talks between us and him kind of broke down before the free agency period when we weren't willing to give him more than about $25.5 million a year. And we also didn't want to give player options near the end of the contract. So we could obviously bring him back if we really wanted to, with the fact that we've got $40 million for free agents, but given that we decided a few weeks ago that we weren't going to be kind of giving him a very player-centric contract at about $25 or $26 million a year, certainly the even longer contract he's looking for now, 8 years, $35 million a year, with player opt-outs after 2 years and then player options in the final years of the deal, when this fragile pitcher could be essentially worthless, or certainly worth $25 or $30 million less a year than he's getting paid. Just not an option for us. So Anderson Paulino, who's looking for about $23.5 million, and Aaron Nola, who's looking for about $13 million, are the more realistic potential options for us if we decide to go with a starting pitcher. If we want to bolster our bullpen, 3 excellent relievers out there, all current or former Royals, in fact. Reed Goleman, who we traded to the Mariners a few years ago when we picked up Julio Rodriguez for the stretch run. Luke Murphy, who was our closer this past season after we picked him up right before the trade deadline. And then our longtime closer, Austin Roberts, who we traded away last offseason because he was heading into his final year of arbitration and set to make a lot of money. So you can see all 3 of those players are looking for in the neighborhood of $14 to $16 million a year. Don't know that we necessarily should or want to be, as the Kansas City Royals, paying even a great reliever that kind of money a year. But if those contracts get more reasonable, that's another direction that we could potentially go. And then with Bobby Witt Jr. locked up at third base now, shortstop is the other big hole on our team. You can see the guy we had on a 1-year deal last year, Tim Anderson, had a really nice year for us, but he's 37 years old, going to be 38 by next season, wrecked physically at this point, and looking for almost $20 million a year. So I don't think that works for us. If we want a glove, we could certainly go with Javi Baez, but he's still looking for $12.2 million. Nicky Lopez, who was our long-term shortstop till we finally moved on from him last year and replaced him with Anderson on that 1-year deal, is back on the market looking for about $6.5 million a year. He is certainly at this point a below-average offensive player, and you can see that in the OPSs and the WRC pluses that he's put up over the past few years. But he is still a pretty good defensive shortstop, still popular with the fans, so he may be one direction to go. So need to kind of figure out the best way to spend the $40 million or so that we have in free agency, and also keep in mind that we don't necessarily want to spend all of it because we have cut our scouting and development budgets down a bit already just to give us a little more flexibility when signing free agents. But in theory, we want those to be even more than the 21 and 31 million that they were last year, because we had cut them a little bit last season. Also, would certainly like to get the scouting budget back to about 22 million, and the development budget maybe up to 33 million. So if we can save $5 million out of this to bolster our identification of prospects and our development of prospects, I think that would be a good thing. So we've got 35-ish to $40 million to spend. Have to kind of figure out the best way to spend it. Looking at the rest of the batters who are out there, Yainer Fernandez looks like a really good bat as a catcher, but he's not that good defensively as a catcher, so he would essentially be a DH for us, given that we already have reigning AL batting champion, RBI leader, Rookie of the Year, Alex Vasquez filling that DH role for us, most likely. No need for Fernandez on our team. And then you start getting into Eloy Jimenez. Certainly would be a nice bat, but we recently traded away Luis Jose because we felt like we kind of had a surplus of outfielders. Right now we've got Frelick in left field, the youngster Velasquez in center, Junior Marin in right field, and then we've got Fabricio Valera, who we picked up in the trade with Milwaukee a season ago, kind of as our backup utility outfielder. And then we've got a few decent prospects down in AAA also who could be competing for the fifth spot among our outfielders. And it's also possible that kind of Vasquez, our DH/first baseman, gets a little bit of action at the corner outfield spots also, in which case we might actually just go with another infield glove. So I don't think we want to be spending $25 million on Jimenez anyways, and doesn't really hit a big need for us. We always do have the potential to move Bobby Witt Jr. to shortstop. He would be more than adequate there defensively and maybe extract a little more value out of the money that we're paying him. But, Nolan Arenado at $18 million looks like he's probably a slightly above average bat at this point, potentially, although he did only put up an 83 OPS plus last year. So for a player who's going to be 40 years old by mid-April, don't see us going that way. Matt Chapman, similarly, looking for $17 million a year, profiles as a very average-ish at best offensive player at this point, even though he still is excellent defensively. And you can see all those gold gloves that he's won over the years. J.P. Crawford, price is a little lower, but not as good defensively and not much of a bat, and he's wrecked physically, also 35 years old. And then we had Rafi Devers on the team last year. We picked him up as a trade deadline acquisition. You can see he was pretty disappointing for us, hitting just 210, 101 OPS plus. Did have 11 homers and 195 at-bats, but that was really it as far as his production. It was really all home runs or nothing else. Does still profile as an above average-ish offensive player, acceptable defensively at third base, so we could go in that direction. That would leave us weaker defensively if we were to go with Devers at third and Bobby Witt Jr. at short, as opposed to if we stick with Bobby Witt Jr. at third and perhaps try to bring Nicky Lopez back at short. We'll definitely be better defensively, but we're probably not going to have as much offense. No doubt that Rafi Devers is a more dynamic offensive player than Nicky Lopez, so that's kind of a big decision we have to make, what to do at third and short. Having Witt Jr. does give us an option to look at either position, and then need to figure out kind of what we want to do with the pitching staff. Do we want to go with one real expensive starter, or do we want to kind of go with perhaps a more reasonably priced starter and then, find a top-end arm for the bullpen to kind of build the pitching staff that way? And right now, as we think about our infield, I think I'm inclined to try to bring back Nicky Lopez at shortstop. We moved on from him last year when he was getting older, and wanted to make more money than we were willing to pay him. And you can see he did kind of fall off significantly last season in terms of his offense production with Minnesota, but still a very solid defensive shortstop. He's looking for $6.5 million a year, I believe, for 3 years. Yeah, I definitely don't want to pay him $6.5 million a year, and definitely don't want a player option in the last season. If we can get him for significantly less, we'll give him or offer him a 3-year deal averaging $5 million a year, but with a team option in the last season. So it's an average of $1.5 million less than he's looking for, and we've got the team option to get out of it in that third season. Probably a little too low for him to go to it, but we're going to put it out there and see what he has to say. He's willing to think about it, so maybe we overshot in terms of what we were offering him a little bit, but 3 years, $15 million, and essentially it's a 2-year, $9.5 million contract if we want to get out of it. I think that's reasonable, and it would certainly shore up our defense. We have been a good team through the 9 years of this playthrough, largely because of our pitching and defense. Obviously, we've had Bobby Witt Jr. at third basically that entire time, except for the first few weeks of the first season when he was down in the minors. And Nicky Lopez has been our shortstop the entire time until last season. And certainly that strong defense on the left side of the infield has been a significant contributor to our success. So willing to deal with his mediocre bat if we're able to get the good glove for that kind of price for next year. And you can see the big question is what to do with the $35 million-ish that we still potentially have left. I like our catching situation. I like our outfield situation, as we've talked about. The infield is a little shaky, at least offensively. Witt Jr. at third is obviously solid. Shortstop, hopefully, if we bring on Nicky Lopez, that helps us defensively. Second base, Ricardo Cabrera is good defensively, but again, not much of a bat. And then first base, potentially Vasquez could play there a little bit, but if we look to upgrade defensively, we've got potentially Juan Palomares, who was in AAA for us last year. Going to be 24 years old by the start of next season. You can see he profiles as a above average contact hitter, maybe going to have average-ish type power, not going to walk a ton, which isn't optimal. He's a competent first baseman, great personality. Split last year between AA Northwest Arkansas and AAA Omaha. Hit .298 in AA and .293 in AAA. So solid bat, but only 6 homers between the two levels, although he did have 34 doubles. So has the solid gap power, has decent speed, excellent base runner. Hopefully could develop a little more contact, home run power, and a better eye. But he could potentially be our first baseman next year, and then we would be looking at Jordan Groshans as a backup infielder, and then potentially Victor Rosa, another rookie who could be in the mix as a backup infielder, or perhaps even platooning a little bit at first or second base with the likes of Palomares and Cabrera. So I don't love our infield. Like I said, I think it's very solid defensively, but outside of Bobby Witt Jr., there's not a lot of hits in that infield. So that is kind of the glaring weakness we have offensively. But I feel pretty good about the bats we've got in the outfield and the bats we've got at catcher, and hopefully with good defense, that'll be enough for us. Also, as I kind of pointed out, you look at the free agents that are available in the infield, and there's no one that, kind of blows me away with the money that they're looking for that's great value. If I was going to go somewhere, it probably would be Devers. And again, he wasn't incredibly successful for us last year. But if we were to plug him in at first base, and then he could also play a corner outfield spot for us in a pinch, that would be another proven major league bat. Kind of would allow us to, among Palomares, Groshans, and Rosa, at least have one of them down in AAA rather than on the major league roster, and then one of them likely in a backup spot, because presumably Devers would be our starting first baseman. He's certainly not going to take over for Bobby Witt Jr. at third. So that's another option to kind of think about. I don't know that I want to be spending $11.7 million a year on him, and let's see how many years he's looking for. 4 years, average of 11.7. Definitely more than I want to spend on him, but if we don't go for the highest end of the pitching staff for our starting rotation, maybe we can bring on somebody like him also. So then it really comes down to the decision between, we're obviously not going to bring back Spencer Bauer, unfortunately, so hopefully he signs a very large contract and we get some nice compensation picks for him. But if we're looking at the kind of top starters out here who are also fragile just like him, Anderson Paulino profiles really nicely when you look at his pitching ratings. He's 32 years old. He's looking for 6 years, averaging $23.5 million a year. That would be a pretty big commitment for us. Over the course of his career, has put up a 108 ERA plus and an 85 FIP minus, so has definitely been an above average pitcher over the course of his career, but kind of had one of his less successful seasons at the major league level last year. So does that mean he's kind of on the backside of his career? Certainly possible. Aaron Nola at 37, going to be 38 by the beginning of June, is most definitely on the backside of his career. Good personality, still has acceptable stuff, pretty good control, not much movement, but at least he's a ground ball pitcher. 2 real good pitches, a solid fastball, an acceptable cutter. Clearly, over the course of his career, he has been a very successful pitcher with a 110 ERA plus, 91 FIP minus. So similar range to where we are with Paulino, and Nola's coming off of a pretty solid performance with the Pirates last year, although only 14 games played. Had 3 injuries last year, a rotator cuff strain, elbow inflammation, and then a finger blister right at the end of the year. So we know that he's fragile, and he's not the pitcher he once was, but Spencer Bauer and Anderson Paulino are both fragile also. So I think there's probably just as good a chance that those guys break down. They're both in their 30s now, too. I think I may lean to go cheap on Nola. Not that $13 million a year is really cheap, but I do like the fact that he's the least expensive of the 3, about $10 million a year less than Paulino, and over $20 million a year less than what Bauer's looking for. And we've only got the 1-year commitment. Now, he does want a no-trade clause, does want a bonus if he gets 160 innings, does want a big bonus for the Cy Young Award, another bonus for the All-Star. So there's a lot of optionality that he wants built into that contract. I'm going to make him a low-ish ball offer and just see what he thinks of it. So $10 million for the 1 year, so $3 million a year less than he's looking for, but everything else, including the no-trade clause, the inning incentive bonus, Cy Young and All-Star bonuses are in there. Let's see what he thinks of that. Yeah, he wants more money. So if we up him to $11 million, I think he's going to be pretty insistent on getting that 13, unfortunately. Well, he's come down a little bit to $12.8 million. What if we go up to $12 million for that 1 year? And he's willing to think about it. So we'll see what happens. He's definitely not Spencer Bauer. There's injury risk with all of these guys, but at least it's only a 1-year commitment. And if Nola can maybe with a Caleb Lagerwell and Zach Jacobs probably heading up our staff if he can kind of slot in as a second starter behind Lagerwell or a third starter behind, say, Lagerwell and Jacobs. He could be pretty useful for us, and there's not a long-term commitment, so we'll see what happens on that end. So we're here on the opening day of free agency. We've got the offers out to Nola to hopefully be our number 2 or 3 starter, Nicky Lopez to hopefully play short, and then we've got about $23.5 million. I think as I'm thinking about things in a perfect world, and it's certainly not going to end up being a perfect world, I think we probably will get Nicky Lopez signed at that amount. I think it's possible that Nola gets other offers and comes back looking for more. But with that $23.5 million, if we could bring in Devers to play first base again for us, and then also bring in one of the top 3 relievers, Gallimon, Murphy, or Roberts, if one of their prices comes down, that would be an incredible offseason for this team, kind of filling every hole that we possibly could think about filling this offseason. I don't think it's realistic right now. The relievers are asking for an average of $15 million. And then when we look at Devers, he's asking for 11.7. So, that's 26.7-ish, which is, $3+ million more than we have at this point. Obviously, if we really wanted to get aggressive on trying to win this coming year, we could take some money out of our scouting and development budgets further. But as I talked about, we'd really like to be adding to those at this point and getting them back to where they were a couple seasons ago. So would like to try to avoid that. I think for the time being, I'm going to wait and see what happens with these 2 offers that we've made for Nola and Lopez, and then see how the markets develop for those other players, Devers, as well as the relief pitchers. And obviously, if one of these deals falls through, we could just potentially move on from Nola, and we have plenty of starting pitchers. It's just that having lost Spencer Bauer at the top of the rotation, we're not as good on the front end as we used to be, but we still certainly have 5, 6, 7, maybe even 8 quality major league starters in our organization. So we'll have guys that can go out and pitch successfully for us at the back end of the rotation. It's just I'd prefer the front end to be a little stronger, and I think Nola could get us there. But if we have to move on from him, maybe that would allow us to invest in both Devers and one of the frontline relievers and kind of build our bullpen a little more than our starting rotation. But for the meantime, we're just going to see what happens with those 2 offers and then regroup once we have some more information. And as we've been waiting to hear back from both Nola and Lopez, some bad news. Will Bryan, who we lost for the second half of last season, suffered a setback in his recovery from his fractured elbow. So he's an important left-handed arm out of our bullpen. Not making a ton of money since he's only been up for a little over 2 years, and he spent the bulk of this season on the 60-day IL after he suffered that season-ending injury. But out for another 8 to 9 months, means maybe we get him back July next season. So he's going to miss at least another half the season. And who knows what it's going to look like trying to recover from that fractured elbow. So that definitely opens a little more of a hole even in our bullpen, and definitely probably encourages us to maybe look at a left-handed pitcher. Right now we've just got Tyler Bosma as our only left-handed starter, and then we would have Mackenzie Gore and Will Goebel as lefties out of the bullpen with Bryan out. So only 3 lefties among the 13, although we do have Bryce Hubbard and then Crawford, who we just traded for, as lefties who are kind of down in AAA right now and do have major league options. Hubbard in particular has been up and down with the team over the past couple of years, so we probably have enough lefties to get through the season that we don't have to go chasing after one in free agency. But certainly if we get further through the free agent period and there's a nice lefty reliever out there at a reasonable price, definitely someone that we would consider more strongly about adding now that we're going to be missing Brian for a good chunk of next year. And we've finally gotten some feedback on our offers. Aaron Nola says we're ahead of the pack right now. We'll see whether anything materializes there, but right now he favors our offer. Still haven't heard anything from Nicky Lopez. Devers is still out there. And all three of the relievers that we're potentially interested in are out there. And it looks like Austin Roberts' asking price has actually gone up by $1 million at this point. So certainly no bargains to be had yet. And not surprisingly, Spencer Bauer has moved on. Big hit to fan interest. Let's see, 5-point hit. So that was definitely significant. What type of compensation did we get? Supplemental first-round pick as expected. Where did he end up going, and what did he end up getting paid? The Atlanta Braves. And less money than the $35 million he was looking for. Actually, the amounts that he was looking for are not all that different than what we had offered to him originally. Still a higher average than we were at. I think the highest we got was about 25.5, and you can see he's probably about $26.3, $26.2 million average over the 6 years. He does have that player opt-out after the second season, but it looks like Atlanta did get him to do a team option in the final year, which he had been looking for player options towards the end. So certainly not nearly as bad of a contract as we think he potentially could have signed, but a lot of money. And I think I had also seen that I thought I had seen something flash across that Paulino had also signed with somebody. Let me just check on that, because if that's the case, we may have more competition brewing for Aaron Nola. Yeah, Paulino looks like he is signed too. Let's just see where he signed and for how much. He signed with the Braves also. The Braves are loading up. Average of around $22+ million a year for 5 years. So certainly we are potentially trying to go the cheaper way with our offer to Aaron Nola, but with the Braves having signed both of the two of the top 3 starting pitchers on the market, there may be more competition coming our way for Nola from some of the people that lost out on bringing Paulino and or Bauer to their teams. So we will see how things evolve. We're headed to the winter meetings tomorrow, so probably will be some stuff happening. And as the winter meetings begin, Nicky Lopez says that he likes our offer, which is good. So right now we are in the front-running position for both Nola and Lopez, but obviously that can change. It would be nice to get the two of them signed so then we can kind of pivot to whatever our next move is. I think I was kind of leaning towards Devers being the next move, but with that injury to Will Bryan, perhaps if we can only have one more big acquisition, it would make more sense to do it in the bullpen. But got to see what happens with Nola and Lopez before we potentially pivot to that next step of the offseason. I'd say 90% plus of the trade offers that come by the desk from the computer AI are not all that interesting. I don't know that this one's real interesting, but it's at least something to think about. We've talked about MJ Melendez a lot over the last few episodes. We did exercise our team option to bring him back for $12 million. Still an excellent defensive catcher, great personality, but we do have the youngster, Angelo Bolden, who's going to be his backup next year. And you can see he probably profiles as a similar to better offensive player. Not as good defensively, but still a good personality. He was our number 1 pick 5.5 years ago. So we could be potentially looking to move on from Melendez at some point, and the Astros have offered us Yordan Alvarez, which would be a really nice big bat for the middle of our lineup. He's 33 years old, and he's wrecked physically at this point, which is not optimal, and he's also making almost $27 million a year. But over the course of his major league career, has put up a 134 OPS plus, with 239 home runs in almost 4,200 at-bats. So has been a very productive offensive player. Certainly would not take on all that salary, but if the Astros were willing to hold on to a huge chunk of his salary, yeah, it could make it interesting. And I don't think they're going to. If we wanted to get them to take 60% of his salary, they're going to be looking for a big-time player or a big-time prospect from us. So I don't think that works. I'd rather go and have two really good catchers for next season with Melendez and Bolden, and if the season doesn't work out as expected, we can always trade Melendez as we approach the All-Star break. So was interesting to think about for a second. I didn't think that I figured, as much a salary dump by the Astros as trying to pick up a good catcher in Melendez, but yeah, it's only a done deal if they keep 15% of his salary, and we don't want to be on the hook for $22 million plus for a fragile, aging left fielder. So that's not going to work. And we've lost Luke Murphy now, so one of the potential frontline bullpen arms that we were interested in is gone. Fan interest down to 82, so that's not optimal, although hopefully if we start signing pitchers like Nola or shortstops like Nicky Lopez, that would help. Still waiting to hear from both of them. They both favor our offers, and that's all we've heard, but would be nice to kind of get somebody signed. We've got the Rule 5 draft coming up in about a week. Was hoping we would kind of know what was going on with both of these players before that, so we could potentially pivot to Devers, who's still looking for $11.7 million, or on the relief side, it looks like it's just Goleman left. So both Austin Roberts and Murphy are gone now, so the really top-end relievers are leaving quickly. Let's see what those guys actually signed for, if they went for as much as they were looking for or not. Luke Murphy also to the Braves. The Braves are loading up their pitching staff, and he only got a one-year deal for $10.3 million, so that's significantly less than he was supposedly looking for. Taking a look at Austin Roberts, he also signed with the Braves. This is insane. The Braves are just building an incredible pitching staff. They signed him for $11.4 million over 3 years. But between Murphy, Austin Roberts, Paulino, and Spencer Bauer, the Braves have signed 4 of the 6 best pitchers, in my opinion, who were available this offseason. And the only ones that they haven't signed are still available, in my view, Goleman and Nola. Wow. Braves are going to be a tough team next year with that rotation. That is insane. How many years is Goleman looking for? 3 years, averaging $13 million a year. If we could get him more like that $11 million number for all 3 years, I would think about doing that. I'm not going to include a no trade clause. We'll bump him up to a $100,000 bonus for an all-star selection. Include a no trade clause and we might have a deal. Oof. Do we really have a deal if we do it at $11 million a year with that no trade clause, or are you just trying to make it sound good? Yeah, he's still looking for more money, but at least we put an offer out there to him, so maybe he'll come back to us at some point. At least he knows we're interested in bringing him back after we traded him a few years ago. But would like to kind of have a little more certainty about what's going on with Nola and Lopez as soon as possible. And a good day here on Friday, the December 20th. Both Nola and Nicky Lopez are signed, so fans are excited by the one-year acquisition of Nola. Fans are excited to see us bringing Nicky Lopez back to the team. So that is good news. We filled two of the big holes on our team, and our fan interest back up to 89, so almost where we were before we started losing players. So that is definitely positive. Now we got to figure out what the next pivot is. Is it a left-handed reliever? Is it another offer to Golemon? Or is it perhaps engaging with Rafi Devers? I think I'm going to make an offer to Devers. Would obviously love to have Golemon back on the team, but clearly we're not at the same kind of number at this point. Some of these major league average-ish relievers are going to be looking for jobs in about 2-3 months, and we'll probably be able to get them for a couple $1 million a year less than they're looking for now. So I think we can always add a bullpen arm at a more reasonable level if we need to. And I know that Devers was kind of disappointing after we picked him up from Detroit. We were hoping he was going to be a difference maker for us, and he was the absolute definition of not being a difference maker with a WAR of 0 in the 51 games while he was with us. But I think that his bat can still be something useful to us. And as I talked about with our infield, outside of Bobby Witt Jr., we don't have a lot of pop with Cabrera and Lopez at second and short, and an unproven Palomares potentially as our first baseman. We could use a little more offense from our infield. So I'm not going to go crazy with an offer to Devers. And you can see his number is down. He was looking for, I think, $10.7 million a year for 4 years earlier. Now he's looking for $10.2 million a year for 3 years. We're going to go even lower than that. Maybe see if we can lock him up. We're going to go low on him. Average of $8 million for 3 years with a team option for the final season. So it's really 2 years with a buyout as far as we're concerned if he doesn't work out. So we're offering an average of $8 million for 3 years. He's looking for $10.2 million a year for 3 years. Let's see what he thinks. He wants the extra money, and he doesn't want the team option in the final year. So we're gonna have to come back with something a little more juicy to get him interested. So we'll bump everything up $1 million a year, give him an average of $9 million a year over 3 years. Want to keep in that team option for the final season. He still wants that $10.2 million. I'm not going to chase him right now. He's already come down from, he was looking for $11.7 million a few weeks ago. He's down to $10.2 million. It sounds like there's not a ton of interest out there. In a perfect world, I would love to be able to bring on board both Devers and Golemon, but right now with the money they're looking for, I don't see that happening. But if things evolve over the next couple of weeks, maybe we can re-engage and get one or both of them onto the roster for next year. And unfortunately, we're not going to have either of them because they've both just signed with other teams. Golemon signed with the Yankees, only $10.5 million a year, although he is getting big bumps, so averaging about $12.5 million a year for over 3 years. So a little more than we had offered. And then Devers signed with the Blue Jays, and he signed for $9 million. Yeah, that So he signed for less than $9 million a year for 3 years with them. We had offered him $9 million a year for 3 years, although we did have the team option in the last year. So I guess he wanted the extra bit of security, but I don't feel like we were really that far off with him. Would have loved if there was a little more discussion, but it is what it is. We're headed into the Rule 5 draft now, and we've got to kind of regroup. We've got a lot of money left at this point still, but kind of our third and fourth targets for the offseason behind Lopez and Nola, who we got, are both kind of off the table now. So we're going to have to kind of rethink things and what we want to do with the money that we have as we try to kind of improve our roster here at the end of 2030 into the beginning of 2031. Trying to think about things a little more strategically. Feel like we probably should have went harder at Devers, only because I'm thinking about the Rule 5 draft right now. But historically, we've been able to find some pretty decent arms for our bullpen in the Rule 5 draft. So while I would have loved to bring Golemon back, I think we can probably find a decent bullpen arm or two in the next few minutes as we're going through the Rule 5 draft. And then if I had been kind of thinking that way beforehand, maybe that would have encouraged me to go a little harder after Devers, but I didn't. So we're going to pivot and see how the Rule 5 draft goes. See if anyone's available when gets to our pick. Not a lot out there in terms of overall that's only infielders, so there's a broader list out there in terms of overall ratings. You know, a bunch of 3-star players out there. Interesting player, Elijah Cruel, a catcher who supposedly has 3.5-star potential, but looks like he could be a pretty decent hitter, but he's only 22 years old, former 8th pick overall just 3 years ago. Not much of a defensive catcher, certainly not someone we'd want to be keeping on the major league roster for the whole year. But let's see what Travis Lee thinks we should do. Thinks we should go after Noah Rennard, reliever from the Red Sox, who's recovering from a ruptured UCL. I don't know that I want to be taking a flyer on him. You can see he's got incredible stuff, acceptable control, 3 nice pitches, but no movement at all. I mean, he's a player who could start in a pinch, but he's been out since February of last year, so he missed the entire season. In San Diego in 2029, 5.64 ERA, which is no good. Obviously, 74 ERA plus 111 FIP minus. We've got low scouting accuracy on him, but a extreme fly ball pitcher coming off a ruptured UCL who only throws in the mid-90s. Sounds like someone who's going to give up a lot of homers, and you can see he's led the league in homers allowed in 2027 and 2028. And even in 2039, he gave up 34 home runs. So Rennard is not going to be the answer for us. I'm going to spend some time looking at the other options out there, but have a hard time believing that I'm going to be following Travis Lee's advice on this selection. And as I've looked through this Rule 5 draft, not really a ton of all that interesting players. The one I'm thinking about is reliever Ben Onishko. 34 years old. He's a lefty. We've talked about we may be looking for a lefty. You can see slightly above average stuff, movement and control. Decent sinker and changeup, really good slider. Over the course of his career, he's put up a 115 ERA plus and a 79 FIP minus, so he's definitely been an above average reliever. Better against lefties than he is against righties, so certainly has some potential as a lefty specialist. I don't love the fact that he's making $4.6 million a year, but we can always just send him back to the Padres if it doesn't work out, or if we decide that there are other pitchers available who are going to be more cost effective and better on the free agent market. So, as usual, it's kind of a free option to put him on the roster now, and if we decide we need that money to sign a free agent down the line, just send him right back to the Padres. So we're going to go ahead and pick up Onishko here in the draft. And we'll move on to the next round. See what the scouting director recommends. Still suggests Noah Rennard. I'm just not even going to mess around with that ruptured UCL. I just don't think he's that good. He just gives up way too many home runs. I have no interest in having him on our team, even if it could be for the major league minimum. So that's all that we're going to do in the draft. Move on to the end. Let's see what happened. A lot of activity there in the first round, as you can see. Our old buddy, Fernando Caldera. Went to the Nationals from the Diamondbacks. So we brought on Ben Onishko, lefty arm. You can see that leaves us with even less money for free agents. But like I said, the nice thing about the Rule 5 guys is that kind of a free option on them regardless of what they're making. And if we want to use that money in a different way over the next couple of months, we don't have to eat it. We just send them back to the team that we picked them from. Looking at the position players that are still available on the free agent market, obviously know Tim Anderson well and like him, but with Nicky Lopez, we've kind of moved on from him. Ty France, kind of the best option at first base, but looks like best case scenario, he's a slightly above average bat with a average-ish kind of glove. He's 36 years old. He's fragile. He's looking for $13.5 million. I think I'd rather go with the youngster Palomares than potentially bring him on board. So there's just not a lot out there that's all that exciting. I definitely wish we had gone a little harder after Devers, but no crying over spilled milk. Jasmed Diaz intrigues me a little bit. Profiles is a interesting bat. Only 27 years old, will be 28 in mid-April. He's fragile. He's looking for $11.6 million. Over the course of his career, he's only been a slightly above average offensive player, but a left-handed bat who can play the corner outfield. Again, outfield is not a huge need for us. He would be an upgrade from Valera. Is kind of a backup outfielder, and with the fact that our corner outfielders, Frelick and Marin, are both fragile, bringing on another fragile corner outfielder, hopefully that lets us piece together two guys who are normally healthy. So he's kind of interesting, but I think his batting ratings kind of look a little better than he's actually produced at the major league level, so definitely not going to chase after him. And then kind of looking at the relievers that are out there at this point with Goleman down, or Goleman gone, I guess. At least according to the vaunted star ratings, Jorge Alcala is the best pitcher that's out there. You can see nice stuff, nice movement, nice control, pretty good fastball and slider. Decent pitcher, 35 years old, looking for close to $8 million a year. Has been pretty effective with a 1.16 ERA plus and a 90 FIP minus over the course of his career. So he could be an interesting right-handed arm. Felipe Tejada, 32-year-old, really good stuff, nice movement, acceptable control, really good fastball, a good fastball, really good slider, acceptable changeup. He's put up a 118 ERA plus and a 95 FIP minus over the course of his career, so also an above average pitcher. He's looking for 10.8 million, so not quite as good. And then there's a fair number of lefties that are still out there. Jose Alvarado here. Really like the stuff and movement against lefties. 35 years old. He's looking for 4.8 million, so about what we are going to be paying the Rule 5 guy we just picked up. Aaron Bummer, another lefty, looking for 5.8 million. Also profiles is pretty tough against lefties, so those guys are both interesting, but not necessarily somebody that we're going to go chasing after. If it kind of comes to us with the money that they're looking for, might bring on somebody like that. I tell you, if I thought that Jasmine Diaz could play first base, he'd be a lot more interesting. And honestly, it's hard to find someone who can't play first base, but you look at that infield range, infield error, and he really can't play first base defensively. But the bat is kind of intriguing, at least among who's out there at this point. But definitely not a player to chase after, for sure. So I'm kind of at a position where we've got money to spend on free agents, but I don't necessarily love anyone that's out there. I guess the last guy to look at is starter Jorge Rodriguez. Really nice stuff and a great changeup, kind of a little below average and everything else. And I think that probably shows up in his career pitching stats. 76 ERA plus, 112 FIP minus. So he's been a little better over the last season in 2030, but certainly has not been an incredibly productive pitcher over the course of his career. So we've got some decisions to make. Obviously, bringing on Nola and Lopez, filled a spot near the top of the rotation and filled our shortstop spot. So from that perspective, it's been a successful offseason, but I do have a little bit of remorse now. I feel like we could have definitely gotten either Goleman or Devers signed if we had been a little more aggressive with the contracts to those two players. I don't think we could have fit both in. But looking at what's available now makes me wish that I had been a little bit more aggressive with those guys over the last few days of game time as we were kind of negotiating back and forth with them. But hopefully we'll find some options with the money we have left. Maybe we can kind of take a look at if there's anyone interesting on the trade block right now, or also spend some time kind of just seeing who's kind of available out there in general. You can see a lot of interesting pitchers making some big money out on the trade block. Josh Hader, at the age of 36, still a pretty solid pitcher. Any batters that are interesting that are out there? Yordan Alvarez, who they tried to trade to us not that long ago. Brett Batty, first baseman, not going to be a difference maker. So we will kind of focus on part 2 of this offseason in our next episode. As I mentioned, we've still got some money to spend, still got some decisions to make as we try to figure out what the roster is going to look like as we head into the 2031 season. So if you've got thoughts on what we should be doing or what you would have done differently, would love to hear them down below. And we will be back in our next episode to try to round out the rest of the roster as we get ready for 2031. Until then, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.